On the 4th of September 1946, inside of Ljubljana court prison, a horrific and brutal war criminal of the Second World War was led to his execution on the gallows. He stood beneath the execution structure before he was passed over to the executioner. Erwin Rösener was a shocking SS commander during the war, and he was responsible for the slaughter of thousands of civilians inside of Slovenia and other lands invaded by the Nazis. There were many members of the SS who were taken to their executions in prisons across different countries at the end of the conflict, and many enemies of the Germans sought to punish the men and women responsible for the concentration camps and also the Einsatzgruppe slaughter. There are still war crimes today that are not discovered and have been lost to time, but the SS were considered the main perpetrators of much of the slaughter at the hands of the German forces. But what happened with Erwin Rösener, and what did he do to send him to the gallows? Join us today as we look at the execution of him, and as always, to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Erwin Rösener was born on the 2nd of February 1902 inside of Schwerter. He had a number of siblings, but when he was roughly 5 years old he moved to Aachen after his father took over a company. A few years later he then began school, and his father became a co-owner in a bread factory. He finished primary school, but in August 1914 his father was called up to serve inside of the First World War in the German army, and the German military even took the factory's horses from his family to use for their war effort. Erwin Rösener then began an apprenticeship with an electrical company, and he attended a higher engineering school. He then finished his trade exams, and after the end of the First World War he continued to work, and his father came home from active service, and he had suffered from bad gas poisoning from the trenches in the front lines. He continued to work hard and worked in a bakery his family opened, before he then took other jobs as a driver. But in 1927, Rösener moved to Alsdorf for work, but when he was there he first became exposed to the politics of the Nazi Party and Adolf Hitler. Hitler promised people that he would restore national pride following the end of the First World War, and he also promised to increase employment opportunities and solve issues with finances across the nation. The Nazi Party membership increased from thousands to hundreds of thousands to then millions. But Rösener then joined the SA, Hitler's brown shirts, who were involved in disrupting political meetings of communists and other enemies, and he then later in 1928 transferred across to join the SS. The SS later became the paramilitary death squads of the Einsatzgruppe, and they were also the administrators and guards of the concentration camps. But around this time the SS were mostly just Hitler's bodyguard detachment, and Heinrich Himmler created a huge and feared military group. He then became a deputy inside of an SS detachment in Aachen, before he then became the leader of the district, and he was given further training from police officers and Nazi officials. In 1933, Rösener was then fully employed by the SS, and he took over command of the 20th SS Standarte, and he was given full military training, as well as pilot training. Inside the SS, he received further promotions, and he at one point transferred to become a member of the Air Force and the Luftwaffe, but when Himmler found out about this he was furious, and he banned further SS members from taking pilot training, and Rösener was then moved back to infantry. But before the Second World War broke out, Erwin Rösener got sick as he had a stomach issue, and he then became the SS commander of Wiesbaden. However, when the Second World War occurred, inside of the SS he became involved in a huge number of war crimes inside of occupied lands. During his time in the SS, Rösener was promoted a total of 11 times between 1930 and 1944, and he got to the rank of an SS Obergruppenführer, and he also was a general in the Waffen-SS and the Nazi police. He also served as an adjutant to Heinrich Himmler, the head of the SS, and he was a close personal friend of the Reichsführer. Himmler was the man who Rösener directly reported to, and he was his boss, and this demonstrated how senior he was with regards to the hierarchy of the SS, and he rubbed shoulders with many other senior Nazis. During the war he reported directly to Himmler, but from the end of 1941, Rösener was assigned to Himmler to become the higher SS and police leader for SS Oberabschnitt Alpenland. Part of the land overseen by him was inside of Slovenia, but one of the most important jobs he had was to crack down on partisan raids and activities inside the region. He was overseeing anti-partisan attacks in Ljubljana, and the Partisans served as a serious threat to the German military and the Wehrmacht. These Soviet underground fighters caused chaos inside the German ranks, and they conducted sabotage operations and also attacks upon German fighters inside occupied lands. But if the partisan fighters fell into the hands of the enemies, then they would often be subjected to harrowing treatment at the hands of the SS or the Gestapo. The partisan would be brutally tortured in different ways to extract as much information as possible from them, and also if they gave little to no information to their captors, they would then be subjected to execution. One example of this was a young teenage girl named Lepa Radic, who at the age of just 17 was hanged from a tree by Wehrmacht officers inside of occupied lands. Specifically, Erwin Rösener ordered the executions of civilians and prisoners of war, and he was even named on the indictment for war crimes during the Nuremberg trials. He was serving as the head of anti-partisan warfare in Ljubljana, and his actions led to many executions, and he was also responsible for torturing prisoners who fell into his hands. Rösener worked with another war criminal named Leon Rupnik, who at the end of the war would also be executed for the fact he was said to have been a major cog in the deportations of thousands to concentration and extermination centres. Rösener ordered the formation of the Slovenian Home Guard forces, known as the Domobranci, who were collaborating with the Nazis. However, as the Second World War turned against the Germans, Erwin Rösener then decided to try and evade capture at the hands of the Allies, and he escaped to Austria, but he was then arrested there by British forces. He was repatriated to Yugoslavia, near to the area of his crimes, and because of this he was placed on a war crimes trial, alongside many other collaborators and Nazis such as Leon Rupnik, and because of his actions the courtroom were horrified when they were told about the mass executions of civilians that had been specifically ordered by Rösener. Many of these men, women and children were shot by firing squads or were hanged inside of towns and cities to strike fear into the hearts of the local population. However, Rösener, as was predicted by most inside of the courtroom, was then sentenced to death on the 30th of August 1946, and he would then be executed within a week of the death sentence being passed. On the 4th of September 1946, Rösener was led to the gallows inside of a courtyard of Ljubljana court prison. At 3 p.m. he was handed over to the executioner, who then in front of a crowd of judges, prosecutors and other prison officials shuffled him over the trapdoor. The noose was secured and Erwin Rösener was stood on the gallows on a stool, and this was then kicked out and he was left hanging from the gallows, and he died within a number of minutes. Erwin Rösener was a very senior and high-ranking member of the SS, and he was a close friend of Heinrich Himmler. But at the end of the Second World War he knew he would be tried for war crimes. However, what slaughter he ordered inside of Slovenia would catch up with him. He was accused of a huge number of crimes and executions of civilians, and for this he was sent to the gallows for his own execution. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.